Hi, I'm Austin. Today we're going to put together our RAD Outdoor Cooking Griddle and Cart made by Wood Pellet Products. We've got them here in boxes. I'd recommend that you get a wheelbarrow or a cart when you're loading and moving these things around because they are heavy. Don't try to move them by yourself. I've got the directions here for putting them together. So we'll pull them off the wheelbarrow, unbox them, and see what we can do here. Alright, so we're going to start with the RAD pellet burner and cart since that's the base of this thing. We'll set the griddle aside for now. We'll get the cart out, unbox it, and see what we're working with. Looks like the shelves, side shelves. Legs for the cart. This must be the burner box. Very well built, stainless. Nice and solid. It's heavy, so you know it's reliable. Everything's really well packaged, stored in there with the packing styrofoam. And I read ahead to the instructions a little bit. It said that a lot of the parts are in the burner box, so I'm going to open that up, get the parts out, and we'll go from there. So this is to take a screwdriver, put it in that hole to open the door. It worked. Chimney cap. Tray. And fire pot. Okay, so we got all our parts laid out here. The first step is to take the legs and fasten them to the bottom shelf, and then we'll put the casters on the bottom of the legs and tighten everything up. Okay, so the next step is to take the middle pan and attach it to the top of the legs on the cart with the provided screws. I'm pretty sure this is the middle pan from the looks of it. I don't know what else it would be. So we'll do that, and then we'll set the legs in the cart down and put the burn box on top of that. One thing I forgot to mention in the prior section was that when you're putting these caster wheels on, make sure that the lock washers are centered on the threads, the threaded studs that are coming out of the casters before you get it real tight. We'll get started with the middle pan and go from there. Okay, so I went to align the middle pan and things didn't come together. So I was taking a closer look at the legs, and I think that mine were mislabeled. The A's and the B's were mislabeled. I've got an A here and an A here, and when I line them up, things don't match. When I take the A over to the B side, line it up, these holes that are drilled in this plate go over these screws and look like they're supposed to. The pitch of this leg also comes in at an angle to where I think our middle pan is going to line up. So I'm going to redo these legs. I'm going to line up the A with the B and make sure that the pitch of these legs is coming in so that it'll attach to these middle pan holes. Okay, so I got the legs turned around, and they're looking like they're supposed to now, and at the right pitch and angle for the base of the cart. You'll notice that I did switch over to the recommended crescent wrench. I'd probably grab an end wrench if I knew the size and had one handy, but the small crescent wrench works just fine. When I was zipping out the nuts with the impact driver, I did strip one of the nuts out. So I've got enough of a stud here. I'll just buy another nut at the hardware store, but I've got enough of a stud here to put that nut back on. It's just I stripped a little bit of that stud off into the other nut. But so I guess if you're going to use an impact driver, just make sure that you're only putting it together one time, because that's probably key to the process. So you're not stripping your threads. So now we will put on the middle pan. And the instructions mention a logo, and to make sure that you have the logo facing the front. And I was hoping to see the logo so that I knew which way to orient it, but there's a front sticker here, and it shows the front, this being read right side up this way. So I'm going to assume that this is the way that the pan sits, and that would make sense that the fire box sits in the pan and that the lip is facing up instead of down. Also, there are some nuts and threads here, so that I think they would be in the way once we try to put the firebox on. So I'm going to proceed like this, and hopefully we won't have to take anything apart. They've provided the bolts here in their Phillips head, so that'll be a little bit easier to install with just a Phillips screwdriver. Okay, so the next step is to install the door handle in the front of the firebox, and then the temperature adjustment rod that goes through here. So we'll get those two things on, and then we'll work on the side shelves next. So here's the door handle, wood handle. Got a nut and a lock washer on the back. Get the door open, slide the washer back on and the nut. Pretty straightforward. Okay, now we'll get the temperature adjustment rod through here. And you'll notice that there's a collar inside here that's got a nut welded to it. And that's what this is going to match up with once you run through the temperature control. Okay. Got the thread started. Got it tight. Things seem to be good there. Okay, in order to get the side shelves on, we got to put on the side shelf brackets. So there are 4 of them, 2 for each side, and there are 8 bolts that go along with that in the one of these hardware packages. So they're the only 8 bolts that don't have nuts associated with them. So I'm assuming that these are the ones that go on the side shelf brackets. And there's already threads in the side of the unit here to receive those bolts. So I'm going to get those attached. Alright, now we'll see how these side shelves line up with the brackets we just installed. Okay, that looks right. Got the fastening hardware here, so we'll get those attached. Okay, I got my side shelves all tightened up here, And I did read in the instructions that and confirmed that these holes are intentionally left open. So we are good to go there. Okay, so we had a little bit of a snafu yesterday when we were installing the middle pan. There is a right and a wrong way to install this middle pan. These holes in the middle pan are on center on the same dimensions all the way around. So these are kind of a square, the dimensions on these holes in the middle pan plates. But the middle pan itself is a rectangle. It can only face one direction. You really do want to look for the front sticker on this middle pan and make sure that it's facing forward when the legs are at their widest stance. That will ensure that when you put the firebox on, that things are oriented correctly and look right. You'll see in the video that I shot yesterday when I'm putting on the handles and the shelf on the firebox that the legs are actually of the cart are actually oriented 90 degrees incorrectly. So this resolved that issue. I basically just rotated this middle pan shelf 90 degrees, reinstalled the 4 bolts. Everything looks fine now, looks real good. So we'll set the cart down, put the firebox on, make sure everything's oriented correctly. So yesterday, you'll see in the previous video with the legs are oriented incorrectly that I installed the handle for the firebox and the temperature control rod along with the shelves that are held up by their own brackets. So the temperature control gauge is fairly straightforward, and then the handle, pretty straightforward. It's threaded with nuts and a lock washer on the back. The shelving has 4 brackets, 2 bolts each. The threads are already in the firebox, so you just screw those in, tighten them up, put the shelving units inside of them, and then each shelving unit gets 2 bolts and lock nuts. Now it's important that when you're tightening down these bolts and lock nuts that you're not tightening them down all the way. That way your shelf has the optionality to be set down like this. If you tighten up this nut and this bolt all the way down, the shelf will be in a fixed position like this. That's also why there's these holes here for an additional bolt and lock nut. If you person wanted to fix this permanently in this position, you could do that. But I like having the optionality to set the shelves down like so for moving it around or putting it in a tighter space. All in all, everything came together really well. Things to keep in mind when you're putting it together is the make sure the legs are on correctly. You really want to look at these plates down here on the legs, and if you're confused about the labeling, the A and the B, just make sure that these holes on the plates line up with the Allen head screws down here, and everything will fit nice and flush and tight that way. Another thing to keep in mind is, as I discussed, the middle pan shelf, make sure it's oriented correctly the right way. Get the front sticker facing this way. That way when you put the firebox on, everything's oriented correctly. You have a nice wide stance like it's intended by the manufacturer on the unit itself. Other than that, make sure you don't tighten down the bolts and the nuts on the shelves, but everything came together real nice. Had I not made a couple mistakes, it would have come together probably in 30 minutes, to be honest with you. And all you really do need is the screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a crescent wrench. I did use an impact wrench with a nut driver a few times. I wouldn't really recommend that, just based on experience now. There's more of a potential to strip threads on things and cause further issues and damage to your unit. So just take your time, use hand tools with the wrench and the screwdriver, and it's minimal hardware. It comes together pretty quick. So we're gonna wipe this thing down, get the griddle out of the box. I think the griddle's pretty straightforward from what I've seen. There's not gonna be a lot of instructions on building that. I think it just kind of comes together in a few pieces. We'll set it on top, and we'll try to get cooking with this thing today. All right, so we got everything wiped down on the cart, and we're gonna unbox the RAD Outdoor Griddle now and see what we're working with. So it looks like this is the chimney cap. stainless steel chimney cap. Set that aside for now. Box to open. And then the griddle itself. So it looks like there's 3 pieces to get started here. So set this griddle down. And open up the box. Alright, so this is stovepipe here in the box. And the drip pan bucket. So minimal parts with this thing should come together pretty easy. From the looks of it, we can just set our griddle on top of the cart here and get started. I am gonna make sure there's no loose debris or anything on the bottom. And then once it's installed, we'll wipe everything down. All right, went on real easy. Just have to line up the stovepipe hole, the exhaust hole in the bottom of the pan, griddle, and everything goes together real nice. Okay, the chimney stove looks like it's got a protective coating of plastic wrap, shrink wrap, so we'll pull that off, get our stovepipe installed. Alright, so there's a plastic came off, there's a seam on the stovepipe. I'm going to orient that on the back so we don't look at it. It's the same way the seam is oriented on the collar that accepts it. Okay, so you can't put the seam right on the other seam. It doesn't seem like there's enough room to lock it, but it locks into place real nice if you put it just offset of it. And we got our chimney cap. Does not look like that has a plastic layer on it. There is a slide on the back here, so you can adjust the width of this to slide over it. So I'm going to loosen that up a little bit and make sure it fits right over the stovepipe. Okay, so you do need to take the screw and the nut off the collar of that chimney cap. Remove them completely, put the collar over the top of the stovepipe, and then reinsert the screw and the nut and tighten it up. Everything should come together really well that way. But it looks good. Excited to get it ready to do some cooking here. Read the instructions about how to get it fired up for the first time. But first thing I'm going to do is get this all wiped down, and then from the looks of it, we'll put some pellets into the fire pot in here and get it lit up. Okay, so we got everything set up here for our first burn. I've got the wood pellets halfway up in the fire pot. I've got some fire gel in there. I'm going to light it with the lighter and slide it in. You'll see that there's a fire pot and a pair of pliers. The pliers are used to slide the fire pot in and out, especially for when it's hot, to make sure that you don't burn yourself. So there's a little lip to grab onto there. But we're going to fire it up. Make sure our pellets are burning. It says to turn the temperature control to low. Okay, it looks like we're burning. I'm going to slide this thing in. We're going to let it run until these pellets burn out, and that should get everything heated for the first time as directed in the instruction manual. And then after that, I'm going to season this thing, and we're going to do some cooking today. Okay, so we're about 15 minutes into this initial burn-in where we filled the fire pot half full with wood pellets. Everything seems to be burning real well, nice and clean. You can see exhaust coming out of the chimney fire pot, no smoke that I can see so far. We'll zoom in here and take a look in the firebox itself. You can see that we got a nice flame going in there with our setting to low. Everything seems to be going really well. I did hold a temperature to the griddle, and it's just over 200 degrees everywhere right now after about 15 minutes. I don't know if you can see it in the video here, but real clean, no smoke whatsoever. I do have a sunshade up above the griddle, about 4 feet above the exhaust chimney cap, and there have been no issues with that clearance and heat. So far so good. We're gonna let it do its thing, finish the fire pot burning out, and after that I'm gonna do a light seasoning with some oil, and we'll start cooking on this thing. All right, so we're about an hour and 15 minutes in. The fire has gone out as near as I can tell. We're gonna see what's going on. The griddle's still hot to the touch. I'll pull this out. Yep, looks like our fire's out, and ash is falling into the ashtray. We're just gonna let it cool, and then we're gonna put a light coat of oil to season this thing and fire it back up, and I think we're gonna cook some lunch on it today. All right, so we're all done with our initial burn-in like the instructions stated, as far as a half a pot of wood pellets, burn it all the way through on low. Now what I've done is I've put a light coat of oil across the whole griddle, and I'm going to try to season the griddle a little bit. I don't know how much seasoning it'll need. It probably, since it's a stainless heavy griddle, you can probably just start cooking on it, especially if you're doing something with high oil content, or if you're cooking with a lot of oil, it would just season on its own. But I wanted to put a light coating of oil on there to see if I could get a nice even season on it. And so I've done that. I filled the fire pot all the way full with wood pellets, started it up, slid it in. I've kept the temperature control knob on low for now. So we're going to do this, burn it in, see if we can season it with a little bit of light oil, and then I think we're going to start cooking on it with some bacon cheeseburgers to start.